folks, welcome to another episode of the Wrench Turners podcast, a show that's about improving the life, well-being, and productivity of mechanics everywhere. I am your host, Mr. Joshua Taylor, founder of Wrench Turners Online, and today we have a very special guest. He is going to be the first in a series about recruitment in the automotive industry, specifically talking about as technicians as much as humanly possible. This gentleman has been around the recruitment industry for a very long time and to his own admission, probably been around automotive since dirt was born. So without further ado, Mr. Larry Feldman. Larry, very much thank you for coming this evening.
My pleasure, Joshua. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So typically, we have either service leaders or mechanics on the show. So it's a very specific kind of first question. What got you into the trade? Well, that's not really where you fit into this mix. You got into automotive in a little different way. What brought you into automotive?
I'll save the real complicated story and just say that peripherally, I had the chance to possibly buy a dealership before I ever worked at a dealership. And
Interesting.
yeah, like I said, a little strange, a little backwards. And I thought, that deal didn't work out, not on our end, but on the other end. I thought, if I'm going to try this, maybe I should just see what the heck goes on at dealerships. And I got involved with sales. And it turned out from the beginning, I had an aptitude for sales. And I don't want to make it sound like it's anything extraordinary. It's just that the basis for good sales is so simple, and it's incredible how many people it eludes, which is just understand the fact, like with everything else in your life, that you'll be dead one day. And if you're going to show up, you might as well have fun and be productive. And that it's a lot more fun to be busy than to be bored. Because most, mechanics don't fall into this category. They're busy. I mean, unless they're a bad mechanic. But salespeople pilfer so much time in the day and waste it and throw it away. I just never got that. I want to be busy. I love to look at my watch and go, wow, I can't believe it's time to go home. The day flew by. So I was
Agreed.
productive from the beginning, wound up being a partner at the dealership. My connection with service was pretty strong because we had a union shop and I had to find a way to relate to the people, motivate the people, make them understand that we were all going to rise or fall together. We had a body shop, we had a service department, we had a parts department, and it was just a matter of coordinating with everybody and making people feel comfortable. And it's no more difficult, I preach this all the time, than to have sales service meetings, to make the two sides feel like they're not at odds, but they're absolutely positively symbiotic. They need each other. Heck, a lot of, we were just on a show together, and I'll continue to state my opinion. A lot of owners don't even understand how symbiotic the relationship is, because they'll complain how much of a lack of retention they have in service because they're not integrating the two parts. Variable and fixed should be like this, not at odds with each other. So that was it. When sold the dealership, I did somebody a favor with recruiting and training. They were horrendous. So I started my own company. I sales, trained, and recruited for a few years. And a dealer in Florida said to me, Larry, we've got 20 salespeople. I said, yeah, I know. He said, yep, let me finish. He said, you found, trained 15 of them, and the top 10 are all your guys. Can you find service people? So being a salesperson, which meant I have kind of a very slippery grasp of the truth, I said, oh, of course I can. How hard can it be to find service people? Called my local homeowner. He wanted what I thought was too much money for techs, only because it's more of a transitory thing. 30 years ago, if you hired a tech, he was there until he died. If you fired him, his wife came in with hair curlers and 3 kids begging for his job back. It's not that case anymore. I mean, it's not just techs, it's everybody is less loyal, less tied into one place. So I lowered my prices, and, fast forward 8 years later, I'm in 200 dealers. I'm in California, I'm in the Midwest, I'm in Florida, I'm in Canada. I got all the business out of service. All the other salespeople hated me. Now, how did I do it? First of all, I was back in service, which a lot of salespeople are. when somebody told me they had a customer for me, I didn't wait until the guy went someplace else or called up, the tech and said, "Is anybody going to call me?" I stopped right. We didn't have cell phones when I started, but I stand there with his phone and say, "Let's call the guy together." So they liked that, and because they felt that I was a pretty darn good salesman, which I was in them, they thought they had a better chance of me selling them than somebody else would. Um, so I've always liked and understood service. I've always realized how important they are to salespeople and how important salespeople are to service. And it was never a complicated, thought to me. It just never was. So that's
Interesting.
basically it in a nutshell. If I hope I made some sense of that.
Oh, that's it's an interesting way because there's now been enough episodes to this point where we met enough really awesome people with really different journeys into the dealership, whether it's into sales, whether it's into service. Some folks have been on the show, like Kathleen Long, have never been in a dealership, but is selling into it now and is now deeply entrenched into the automotive culture, into what it's like to be a person who works in a store. What do they understand about the people who work in the stores? And getting to know and feel what it's like to be in the store. And you took a definitely different approach buying into one. But I think the big part of your success is understanding that sales and service are a very symbiotic relationship. You can do tremendously well in service, or you can do tremendously well in sales. But if you don't have a circular relationship between the two, and you aren't nearly as successful. But when you are a circular relationship between the two, you are dramatically successful.
By the way,
Um,
I don't like to disagree with my host, but that's not the secret to my success. The two secrets to my success, first and most important, is my mental instability. Um, you know, uh, being crazy opens all the doors. People always take my calls. They figure they're going to hear a joke or something good's going to happen. And something I can take no credit for. It's the DNA of my father. I work really hard. A lot of people like to work hard in their mind, but don't really
mhm.
work hard. I work hard. And I'm very old school. I like to do things right and right away. Now, again, this is coming from a guy that admits to being mentally unstable. It's not like I'm a tyrant or I'm difficult, but I think if you approach today's world and realize that we're all going to die and that we're currently dying and that we need to turn the volume up and get things accomplished, and how much fun it is to do that. I don't know. I mean, it's so sad when you see people that are unmotivated because they don't realize how much fun it is to be productive. I say it all the time. Virtue has to be its own reward because they've stopped giving out trophies. It's not like Little League where everybody gets a trophy, which is a despicable way to raise people.
And 100%. I like how you frame that too, because I've never heard it put in such a way. And I think one of the things you said right off the bat is that most technicians or all technicians are busy, and that is unfortunately not always the case. There are stores out there with technicians who don't have ambition or drive, and there's also unfortunately leaders of shops who do not have their own ambition or drive, so they're not filling the shop. So that exists on both
Wait a
sides of that
minute.
coin.
Once again, just not this time. I'm not taking issue. I'm just adding it into the puzzle or the mix. It's not so. The another huge problem between the service managers and the techs is their strength may not be in building bonds with their service techs, just like some service advisors' problems is they don't build bonds with their customers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, listen, I've become very well known as a recruiter, but the really funny thing is, I think I'm a pretty good recruiter, but I don't disconnect the screen here. I think I'm the best trainer on the planet Earth. And the people that see me agree, and you're going to say, Larry, that seems kind of cocky, but I train 3 hours at a time and nobody wants to leave the room, go to the bathroom. When I tell them to break for lunch, I have to throw them out. Um, I'm all in. All right. I want to give you everything I've got. I want to have as much fun as I possibly can. Now, again, I'm not known for my humility, Joshua. I happen to think I'm the best. But let's say I'm not the best, and there's plenty of guys that are okay or average or whatever. The reason that they get hired is there's sales managers that are unbelievable at desking a deal or appraising a car, but they don't necessarily have the skill or the desire to train. It's not a knock on them. I don't have any desire to be a tech. If you brought me into your shop, you'd say, this guy's one of the best salesmen and trainers there is. This guy can't turn a damn wrench. It's just not a skill that either they're comfortable with or that they do well. So with a lot of service managers, they don't mean any harm. They want to be successful. They really want the techs to be successful. They get paid off of it, and they want their dealerships to be successful. They just don't quite have the skill set to do it. Um,
I would
and
wholeheartedly agree there, because you look at the number of and percentage of service managers out there, the majority of them are service advisors promoted. They've never been in the shop, so they don't have that. Even if it's not even within the same shop, you go from one place to another. There was a really great service advisor, and now they've found themselves in a position as a service manager in another facility. They have not only have they not turned a wrench like the entire service staff, they haven't earned the respect of the facility at all because they're brand new. So not only do they not share the life experience and career experience of those in the shop, but they haven't earned the respect of them either. So it's very difficult in personal experience as myself looking at service managers, as well as my experience through coaching and just life experience. If you don't have respect for the leader that's coming in to coach you, train you, provide you the resources and tools that you need to be successful, if you don't trust and respect that they can do that for you, the likelihood that you're going to listen is slim, and the
you
likelihood
have
that
to
you're going to
feel,
stay is slimmer.
Joshua, and you have to feel they have your back. Um, you
Mm-hmm.
you have been on my show Lethal Sales multiple times. That's why I was so flattered when you asked me to reciprocate and come on your show. And would you agree that I have the strangest approach to hosting a show of anybody you've seen? I basically torture everybody that's on the show. I make fun of them.
Agreed.
But but these same people keep coming back, and they actually like me because
I
I'm
think
able
it's
to
maybe
ground.
a masochistic sense of behavior, but I think at the end of the day, the challenge is, and it would probably exemplify in your training as well, is that when you make an environment safe, it doesn't matter how you do it, but if you make everybody that's around you, whether you're leading the team or part of the team, if you make the environment feel safe where people can be themselves and talk about topics that perhaps are difficult to talk about, it doesn't really matter how it comes about, as long as the environment feels safe to everyone and everyone continues to come back and say, okay, this is a
Right.
safe environment to have this conversation in. And you can continue to come back. That doesn't matter whether we're on a podcast talking about lethal sales or here on Rush Stars. It doesn't matter. If you have an environment where people feel safe to discuss the things they want to discuss, you're just going to empower people to be better,
You
right? It
also
doesn't.
you also want to make it fun. Okay.
Agreed.
People will do better when they're happy. They'll tend to stay. They'll tend to be more productive. Um, I gear all my training around showing people how to be better and how to have fun. Can I give you a really brief example? Just because I think
Absolutely.
you'll get a kick out of it. When I train, and it's really a mixed bag because there's dealerships that bring me in to train their vets who need to be refired. I do a lot of sales training, recruiting, where I bring in people that have never sold cars. You've seen pictures last 3 4 weeks. I've had
Mhm.
20, 30 people in a room. I beat them up for about 40 minutes. I think you have to break the muscle down to build it up. It's like being at the gym. And after I beat him up for about 40 minutes, I say, all right, beat you up enough. Who wants to be wealthy? Every hand goes up. Now you're talking wealthy. All right. I'm going to show you the person that's going to teach you how to view your customer so you get wealthy. I don't show him Steve Jobs. You know the story. Got fired from his own company, came back and invented the iPhone. I don't show him Richard Branson, Virgin Records, Virgin Airlines, guys everywhere. I show him a slide of Sly and the Family Stone. Now, if they're 20-year-old kids, I have to explain that this was Prince before Prince, because we're lucky if they ever heard of the Beatles, much less Sly and the Family Stone. And I explained this guy was outselling Stevie Wonder in the late 60s, early 70s. He was. It's the hottest black crossover artist there was. So this guy has a great song called Everybody is a Star, that we have to treat our customers like stars. And I tell the people, we kiss all the wrong butts in the car dealership. We kiss the owner's butt, we kiss the general manager's butt. I'm not saying don't treat them respectfully, but they're not really the people that pay you. I don't care if the owner's name is on the check. He's the middle guy handling the money. It's your customers who you treat like stars. And if you find out their credit's bad, treat them like superstars. All right, you all have that? Great. Who has a dog? I swear, Joshua, by now they're afraid to raise their hand because they realize, again, I'm mentally unstable. So 3 or 4 always do. And I say, when you rub your dog's belly, their leg twitches. They all laugh. I said, don't laugh. It's the same reaction you get out of a sales manager when you tell them you have a deal. Never go to the sales desk and say, I don't have anything. I don't care if the guy tells you he's going to jail in the morning. Always say to your managers, with your help, I might have something. Every manager has an ego. They jump out of their chair and go, let me show you how to close this damn deal. So again, I don't think anybody else teaches that way, and I don't think anybody else bends their format. I wrap my format around my class. If a guy's from Venezuela, we talk about Venezuela. If the guy's a cop and he switched, we talk about that. So it makes it more fun for them, which in turn makes it more fun for me. And my analogy here is clear. You want to be the kind of service manager that guys can't wait to work with you and help you. Okay. With my union shop, it was a Cadillac agency. I was always wearing a suit and tie. If I saw them pushing a car, I broke out into the parking lot and helped them push the car. They were my guys. And once
Mm-hmm.
they knew they were my guys, everything changed. Service managers have to treat these guys like they're their guys. And they have to look up to them and say, you know what? I'm doing it to make money. I want to turn the hours, but I'm doing it because I love my guy. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that key piece, then you're in trouble. And it's harder than
That
it
part
ever
of the team.
was because people are so bad at communicating these days. Horrible. You've,
Agreed.
you've heard people say, call Feldman, he answers his phone, and I always do. Who else does?
Mm-hmm. I'm unfortunately I'm really bad for it. I'll text no problem, but I am really bad at picking up the phone. But it really that's just an excuse, right? You're
You
shirking the
got to
excuse.
understand that if you text me a joke, if you tell me a joke, I laugh. If you text me a joke, maybe I read it wrong and I think you're a misogynist, you're racist, you don't like Jewish people. The human voice and the inflection and the tone. And by the way, you can change the pattern. Well, this isn't going so good with Joshua. Let me try something else. And these
Mm-hmm.
texts and these emails are forever. Look how many lives we've seen and careers we've seen ruined because of something somebody said and immortalized 10 years ago.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed. I'm thankful that I haven't been one of those, and I agree that not enough is said in text. Sorry, not enough context is given in text to really portray the conversation as it should be, or as well as it could be through a conversation on the phone. There's nothing wrong with a conversation on the phone.
Sure.
We get caught up, I think, in some of the granular pieces and allow it to overwhelm us with, if I call them, I'm going to be on the phone forever, and I'm going to. You know what? Guess what? It might be the last time you talk to them.
RSVP.
They might be hit by a bus tomorrow,
Can we go
right?
back
We use
to,
that
since you're a service expert, can we analogize right back to service? Tell me what means
absolutely.
more. What means more? Your service manager sends you a text, good job, or he comes over, puts his arm around you, he says, man, I don't know what the hell I would do without you. You're the best.
Absolutely in person. Absolutely in person. There are, however, what I will say as a devil's advocate here is that there's not enough of that happening. And
Let's
I
see.
use the 80-20 rule for just about everything, and that's one of them. So there's a lot of crap that a technician deals with in a day. Just a lot of crap that they deal with in a day. Not to say that there isn't a lot of good stuff that happens during the day, but they deal with a lot of crap. And one of the challenges that service managers have is that in order to be an effective leader, they need to hold people accountable. The challenge is just because you hold people accountable for the things that they aren't doing, you also need to hold them accountable for things that they are doing. And if you are not using the 80-20 rule between positive and negative, it means that every time that you go out to them, if it's only negative, you're
They
only filling the
perceive it's
bank
going to
with
be
negative,
negative and they shut you down.
right? They're not going to listen. They're not going to behave in a professional manner. They might more likely to be going off. They're more likely to leave. They're more likely to quit. All of those things. But if you think, if I got to hold somebody accountable on a weekly basis, there's all kinds of things that go into that. There's all kinds of, you should be doing coaching on a regular basis as a service manager. If you're going to somebody on a regular basis to give them discipline of some description or whatever the case may be. But if you have to do that, what are you doing on the positive side of things? To quote Ed Roberts, people repeat what you recognize them for. So if the only thing that you're going at these people for is negative, they're going to repeat the negative shit.
It's like
They're
a
not going to do
small
the positive
child.
stuff.
It's like a small child acting badly because he knows his mom will give him attention for it.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. So that's it's really impactful when you realize that how much your positive energy can really bring up a shop versus how much your accountability, which is masquerading as negativity, is going to do to the shop. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that story, Larry. So one of the things that now, first things first, before we get into the very specific recruitment questions that I wanted to ask you to get your perspective on, is I want to get your one piece of advice for a mechanic. What would be your one piece to help a mechanic be happier, healthier, more successful tomorrow?
Get into their service advisor and service manager's head and go up and say, hey, I know you just got here. I know you've been here 20 years, but just in case it's not clear and evident, I'm here to work with you. I want to do everything I can to make these customers happy, to make you happy. I want to bring home as much money as I can. I don't want to have any comebacks. So, hey, always feel free to reach out to me. I'm into constructive criticism. I'm great if you want to put your arm around me. Um, that's all. Boss, I just wanted to let you know that.
I like it. I like it a lot. Making sure they understand where you actually stand. Don't let them think about it. Let them know it.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? What's the phrase Russell Hills said on a regular basis? Vapor to paper, and that's effectively what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome,
Sure.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
So
Thanks for having me on tonight.
you're very welcome, sir.
Or,
So one of the
do you just get tax credits for having mentally unstable former dealer
I get
recruiters?
I get I get tax credits. I get them in form of monopoly money up here in Canada. So it's
I have Monopoly money tied that I wear on the final day of training because that's when I teach them how to prospect and recruit, and that's how they make their money. So I get it.
and negotiate for Park Place.
Absolutely.
You're trying to negotiate yourself out of taxes and or rent on the which have like four houses on it. Yeah, cool.
Good luck
So,
negotiating your way out of taxes with this lunatic as president.
fair. Okay, so one of the questions that I was asked, I'm not going to ask one because I had about 12, and that's just going to be ridiculous. So one of the first questions I want to ask you about recruitment is who pays? How does that work?
The the
Um,
um, the the customer who would be the dealer pays. When I first got into recruiting, there were recruiters, and I bet you there still are, that would charge the candidates to try to get a job. I loathe that. And the reason I loathe that is it's patently dishonest. Now, if you ran into me, you'd probably say, "Man, this guy talks up a blue streak. He's got some good sense of humor. He's a salesman." But you could also run into a guy that's not loquacious, doesn't speak well, is very shy, and you know isn't going to be a good salesperson. So to take money from them is so ethically damaged and so bad. So I don't make candidates pay. The people that call me and say they need somebody, I find them. And I'm a whole what you heard tonight. We were on a Peter Smith show.
mhm.
Some crazy figure over $100,000 replacement value. Trust me, I'm a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that. But it's still much easier for me to find people than dealers and GMs and service managers. They're busy doing their thing. You know,
Mhm.
these all these jobs, the job you have and I have and other people have are full time jobs. And if we do both, it's like you don't go into too many dealerships where the controller is also the used car manager because you're going to take away from both jobs.
Agreed. Agreed. There's a line, and we've had this discussion. The lads and I on 10 Mil Mastery, we're talking about bumper to bumper technicians versus specialists, and we all believe that the bumper to bumper tech is gonna start going away or fading out to a much smaller percentage now because the complexities of cars. We need to have a generalized knowledge of the car, but to be intimate with all of the systems so that we can be successful to the degree that we need to be on a regular basis to make sure we don't have comebacks, to make sure our customer experience is top notch. Specialists and making sure that we're very good in very, very, very good in one area and really good in the rest is kind of where we need to be so that not only the store, ourselves, and the customer can be all successful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you're
Appreciate
right
that.
because the first really cool car I ever had was a real old used Grand Prix. Um, Man, you looked under the hood, there was nothing there. There was a carburetor, there was a place to put water, there was nothing.
Hmm.
You look under the hood now, like nuclear physicists would be confused. Einstein would be saying, "Let me stick with the math. This stuff's too complicated for me."
And it gets worse. And sometimes, I think back to some of the earlier Jags that I saw when first being in a dealership and seeing used V12 Jags come into the store, and all you could see is just an entire spaghetti mess of vacuum lines and the complexities. Even then, now you look at, say, a Lexus, and you can't see anything. It's just plastic cover. You have to take a plastic cover off to see more plastic, to take plastic off to see something that
But wait a minute.
operates.
To be fair, those British cars back then were much more fuel efficient because none of them would start.
You aren't wrong. You aren't wrong. Oh my goodness, my goodness. You aren't wrong. I'm just trying to think of the V12s, the V10s. I just remember pushing I can't remember the acronym. I think it's EJ, whatever. The first Jag convertible that I ever properly saw, and in person, I had to push into the shop at a Chrysler store.
We
So
had
like,
for a while we had the Sterling franchise. Yeah, we had 30 Sterlings. None of them would start. I mean, go back to ask people that worked on a Triumph, or it just MGs. The British built some really cool cars, but the electrical systems did not seem to be their specialty.
no, no. Okay, so the specialty is definitely a thing going forward, and I would suggest that it's probably going to be, you're talking about shortage and so on and so forth, and there's lots of, we can go down the rabbit hole of shortage, and we won't, but functionally, if you're talking about a shortage now, think about 5 years from now when being a specialist is becoming, at least in my opinion, the thing to be. And in 5 years, we've got another 5 years of people leaving the industry because of retirement, and we're at that age where that's happening more and more. It's going to be even harder to find someone who's been in the business for 30 years to teach a new specialist how to do what they do.
But
So
we'll
that
nature abhors a vacuum. It'll work
yeah,
itself out.
yeah. So one of the other questions here, and I'll do maybe one or two more, but from your business specifically. So let's say a CDJR store GM reaches out to Mr. Larry Feldman at Career Changers and says, "I need a B Tech." From that point to the time that you have a technician in the bay, what is typically the timeline?
Couple weeks,
A couple
maybe a
weeks,
month. Yeah.
maybe a month. Okay. And from a technician's perspective, what should they expect from a recruiter like yourself? Meaning that the dealership has said, "Mr. Feldman, I need a technician." Now you do what? And then from the technician's point of view, what happens?
Well, I'm not sure you're going to find any recruiters like me. I'm much nicer than most recruiters. When I have my big classes, if I get 10 guys hired and I get a big check and there's 4 guys that didn't get hired, I call other dealers and say, I don't want any money, just take the guy. So,
Mm-hmm.
you've been around me enough to know that I'm mentally unstable, but I'm a heck of a nice guy. Um, with techs, with anybody trying to get a job today, make sure you bring as much complete information in as possible, because one of the things that it seems like with human resources, sometimes humans are not a priority, it's paperwork. So I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the greatest sources of frustration is, all right, let's go, let's get rolling, and there's a delay. So as once again, as long as we communicate and say, listen, they like you, they want you, they got to do this. Took a little longer for the drug test, whatever it is. Listen, everything we're talking about, Joshua, can be boiled down to the same thing: communication. How you
Mm-hmm.
relate to the people, how you let them know what, why, when, and where, and make it easy. You know, I do things differently than most recruiters. It's why I think my listen. I deal with I compete against giant companies and I get more business than they do. It's because when they deal with these giant companies, yeah, they get tremendous resources, but they don't get a guy that's going to call right away. I call guys 8 o'clock at night and say, "What are you doing, Feldman? What are you bothering me for? I got a tech on the other line. This guy's a winner. Let's do a three-way call." Who does that but other than me? So you just have to communicate with the people and make it clear and make it simple. Nothing complicated. Listen. Look, if it makes it any clearer for you and anybody listening to this, in 100 years, we're all going to be dead. Not one damn thing we're talking about is going to matter. So you got to go into it and realize that what matters is what we're doing now, having the right attitude, not walking around angry all the time because things didn't go exactly our way, because things never go exactly the way you want, and just be a little lighter, have a little fun. Look at the advantage guys like you and I have. You mentioned Russell Hill by being positive and upbeat. In a world where
Mm-hmm.
everybody's negative and everybody's looking to tell you why it won't work or why bother or why be cynical. So again, I just try to be a minimalist with all this stuff. Have fun. Answer your phone. Talk to people in a straightforward manner. You just get a lot accomplished. As I said, you've been on my show. You can't describe my show. How was the show? Well, Larry likes to torture everybody, interrupt them, and pick on them. Oh, do they all hate him? They actually kind of like him
I
because it's
think that one of
real.
the differences that you highlight, and whilst anybody listening that thinks that let me pause for a second. If you were to tell me a decade ago that I would be in a position that I am today, where my driving force of everything that I do is to be as positive as humanly possible, to push as much positive energy forward as possible for mechanics, I would have told you to go fly a kite. I wouldn't have done it politely, and I would have walked away.
So the fly
Now
would have
I
been
understand
a
how much
different word
energy.
that start. So the fly would have been a different word that starts with F.
Yes,
I just want to make
yes,
that. I'm a little
yes.
slow in the
And
uptake sometimes.
these, like the person that would do that wouldn't get the time of day from me. And now I realize that part of the reason why I'm so driven to doing what I'm doing is that because I was the person who needed it most a decade ago.
So
I needed it
hold on.
most
Psychologically, do you know what we hate most in other people, Joshua?
ourselves.
Yeah, it's what we recognize in ourselves. Nothing drives us crazier than what we represent in ourselves. And as far as where you've evolved to, and I've evolved to, my hero, I love Keith Richards. I'm big on Winston Churchill and Harry Truman, but my hero, the most accomplished human being that ever lived, don't debate me, you'll lose, is Ben Franklin. I could go on for 9 hours. But one thing I love to quote of his, among hundreds of others, is when you're finished changing, you're finished. Sounds like a quote from Steve Jobs, but he said it in the 1760s. When you're finished changing, you're finished. Everybody you know has evolved. You know Russell Hill's backstory. Think about everybody we know. They were here and now they're there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know this, but I'm even more passionate about music than I am about the car business. I'm a full time musician. I got 7 CDs out. We just had some songs in a film, and even though I know the Beatles are the greatest musical figure we'll ever see, don't tell me about Zeppelin or The Who or any of those groups. These guys did more great music in 7 years than the Stones and Dylan have in 60 years. And they changed every year. They changed music from Rubber Soul, from Revolver, from Sergeant. Unbelievable. Change. We would have never heard of all these British groups if it wasn't for them. But I still like the
Agreed.
Rolling Stones better. I just do. And I remember Mick Jagger saying, man, if I'm singing Satisfaction when I'm 40, shoot me. Well, he's singing it now when he's 80. We
Mm-hmm.
change, we evolve. The things that we're dead set against and we're absolutely certain of, a little while we're not that certain of them. Things change, things evolve. And a guy like you, a guy like me, the cool part is we can look back and say, you know what? I was wrong, or I changed my mind. So I kind of like that about you, and I would like to believe, crazy as I am, I'm always flexible.
Agreed. I think
But
that's one of
you're
the
agreeing
things that.
with the flexibility, or that I'm crazy, or both.
Yes.
This is why you failed the SATs. It was multiple choice, and you just colored all the dots.
Correct. The straight line. I pencil whipped it. Larry, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes this evening, give us a little bit of recruiter insight, life into your little bit of storied life, and in how you came into the automotive industry, your story and therein. Appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your very busy schedule,
My
because I know
pleasure.
you bounce from one to another. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure meeting you and hanging around with you, and I respect you and like you, and I was honored to have to be a guest on your show. And thank you so much.
You are very welcome. And folks, I think that's the end of another episode today. But as usual, we have some announcements to make. First things first, Larry is only the first of several recruiters that we're going to have on the show. Diversely, we've got automotive folks, very specific, like Larry. We've got some folks slightly outside of purview to get a little bit more perspective. Like always, I try to give a little bit more perspective. Like I mentioned earlier, Kathleen
Well, wait a
Long,
minute. Why
who
don't you just have me on six more times, and this way you can
I
gauge
could
if
have you
anybody's
on
really
six more
watching
times
you.
and get all six of your personalities. And I think some people could really identify with that. I know some of the technicians I've worked with in the past would have a great, relevant conversation with that. But I think without much more input, folks, the last quote of the week. Now, Larry had a whole bunch of quotes in there that I think you guys need to go back and listen to. But something that kind of comes up and can kind of quote a little bit of the crazy along with it. I found this interesting piece while I was looking for today's quote because I was thinking about how crazy life has been recently for me, working the way I work and what I do, and get to be with all the people that I get to be with, doing everything I possibly can to spend time with my family as well. That, and here's the quote: "There cannot be a crisis next week. My schedule is full." Henry Kissinger. So, folks, remember, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.